Hi, moderator. This is Paul Sanchez. I'm not sure if I did a mic check.
Thank you, Paul. We've already mic checked Amnon, Debbie, Dr. Parker, and Todd Borges.
Okay, is everyone back on the call, or are we still waiting for a few?
This is Marsha. I'm back.
This is Holly. I'm back.
Okay, I think we're still, do we have Debbie Snow on the call?
Yes, I had checked in a minute ago, I thought.
You did, Debbie.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so are we still waiting for Dr. Diaz?
I guess the answer is yes, Paul.
Okay.
This is the moderator. He apparently fell off the call. He's an attendee. I just made him a panelist, so Dr. Diaz is now a panelist.
Hi, I'm here.
Thank you. Then I think we are ready to go. Dr. Parker, we can go back to our agenda.
Okay. We'll be moving to item 12. Discussion and possible action on board proposed legislation regarding audiology licensing requirements as stated in Business and Professions Code sections 2532.25 and clarified in Title 16 CCR sections 1399.152.2 and 1399.152.2. And Paul, I believe you're going to be the one leading this.
Okay, Dr. Rajo, did you want to start talking about this and give us a background?
Yes, I will. So many of you know already, because we've been talking about this for a while, but that 2532.25B2 requires the submission of evidence of no less than 12 months of satisfactory completed supervised professional full-time experience or part-time equivalent. And this experience shall be completed under the direction of a board-approved audiology doctoral program. And one of the factors operating here is also in this background. The RPE shall follow completion of the didactic and clinical rotation requirements of the audiology doctoral program. As it turns out, the current hearing and balance healthcare training finds difficulty with this statutory requirement because it causes restrictive aspects of program completion. And that creates hardships for audiology doctoral students and the programs themselves, and that may end up not supporting the protection of consumers for audiology and balance services. So the current needs are these. The California State University and private AUD programs typically require that their enrollees earn approximately 850 clinical clock hours because that's the typical nationwide adoption of that hourly requirement. And that clearly exceeds the requirement of 1399.152.2. We will not be addressing that particular regulatory requirement today. We're going to focus more on the statutory change that we're looking for. Due to the requirements, all programs require a 12-month third or fourth year RPE or required professional experience, even if the 1,850 clinical clock hour requirement has already been met prior to the completion of 12 months. And this situation, along with requiring that all clock hours be achieved following the completion of the didactic and clinical aspects of the program, that causes significant financial and timing hardships for students who complete their clock hours well before, maybe as early as 10 and a half months prior to completion of the program, or for those who have difficulty achieving the 850 hours, even if they have 12 months. And this is due to the CSU executive order requiring the completion of the program in 11 semesters or visa limitations for foreign students. So on September 23rd of this year, the Audiology Practice Committee for the board held a teleconference with a number of stakeholders to discuss the issues of the timing of this requirement and the requirement itself. And what we discussed is that the fact that throughout the course of study for an AUD program, Audiology Clinical Doctoral Program, students enroll in clinical experiences, or sometimes called rotations, that bear a significant relationship to the didactic coursework that they're taking at the same time. And they participate in a number of these clinical experiences with a variety of patient populations and a number of different pathologies. And they're all supervised by licensed audiologists. And per the current statute, AUD students are not able to include any of the time spent in these supervised clinical rotations toward that 12-month RPE requirement. The board investigated the stand of the two accrediting bodies for audiology doctoral education, including the Council on Academic Accreditation, as well as the Accreditation Commission for Audiology Education, asking what their take was on it. And the CAA says, quote, the doctoral program in audiology must meet the following requirements: include a minimum of 12-month full-time equivalent of supervised clinical experience. These include short-term rotations and long-term externships that should be distributed throughout the program of study. So obviously then CAA does not require a contiguous 12-month externship, but they do want it to be 12 months. The other accrediting body, ACAE, does not actually stipulate a required number of months of study or a requirement for a particular number of clinical hours. Rather, they require that the program, which includes both didactic and clinical experiences, must prepare the students to meet the recognized competencies for independent practice. So during our teleconference meeting, we talked to nearly all, I believe all, AUD program directors, and asked how many clinical rotations do people typically participate in, that is the students. While I didn't get a number of actual rotations, most of them said that students earn between 600 and 800 clock hours or clinical hours during those pre-RPE rotations, and that uniformly, they said that the students receive 100% supervision during those rotations. So in light of those comments that we received during that conversation and others, we would like to propose a change to Business and Profession Codes 2532.25, which you can see in your board book if you have that open. You can see what we're addressing here is our understanding is that it's not a good idea to get rid of the 12-month, not only because other programs or accrediting bodies require it, but our understanding is the legislature doesn't like to cut back on standards. So we wouldn't find this a very positive move to try to reduce it to something less than 12 months. However, trying to make it all occur after the didactic and clinical rotations are completed is the bottleneck here. So we are suggesting, if you look under Business and Profession Code section 2532.25 2, you'll see that we've changed the language to read, this experience shall be completed under the direction of a board-approved audiology doctoral program and may be obtained by participation in supervised clinical rotations or experiences that are held throughout the duration of the program and during the required professional experience. Acceptable types of clinical rotations or experiences shall be defined by the board through regulation. So we haven't looked at that just yet. But our goal today is to modify this 12-month requirement in terms of when it can occur for the most part. So I would like to I believe we invited some program directors for AED programs in the state to join this call for further discussion, so I'd like to encourage that if I could. Hopefully, a host, we have, as far as I know, there are going to be 1 or 2 people who are going to join the call.
Thank you, Madam Board President. I don't know what their names are, but we do. Are they, would it be Christy Kirsch? Is she one of the?
She would be. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Christy, I'm going to go ahead and make you a panelist. That way you can unmute yourself at will. And then, is there anyone else you're expecting? Because I can promote them as well.
I thought Peter Ivory was going to be on the call.
Okay.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Hi, I'm Christy Kirsch from San Diego State University. I would just like to say that I've spoken with our program director. I'm the clinic director and the director of clinical education. And what we would be proposing would be the 12-month, and also the number of hours would be accumulated within. Well, our program is a 4-year program, so it would be throughout the 4 years of the program. But I'm a little confused at the very end. Now we would want all of the we would support having the hours accrued during all 4 years of our program count toward the total number of about 18-20 hours. With 12 months of RPE required.
Okay, so you're okay with the 12, keeping it 12 months, but adding those rotation hours throughout the course of the matriculation in the program.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes. So we would because. ASHA does allow, not that we have to do exactly what ASHA says, but ASHA does allow us to count the hours accrued during all 4 years. And then critical to this question is we would definitely want no less than an 11-month RPE. We're happy with 12.
Yeah, it seems best to keep the 12. And another piece, though, is that if you send your students out off campus to do some of their pre-RPE rotations, I believe that you have pretty strict MOUs, contracts with these agencies to verify that they are getting 100% supervision during these early experiences. Is that the case for you?
We do have so the first 2 years are absolutely 100% supervision. The third year is primarily 100% as well. That's the agreement that we have. The first 2 years we have in-house. The first year at SDSU and the second year at UCSD. So I can verify for absolute sure that those are 100%. And our MOUs with our third years off campus do request 100% supervision as well.
Okay, so that's not a hardship for you.
That is not a hardship for us, no. Yeah, and now, when we're counting basically, I know there was a question at one point in terms of what kind of hours, and we're not counting just patient contact hours. We're counting more shift time hours here in this count of about 18-20, so that, as Asha says, any activity that an audiologist would typically perform during a typical workday is eligible for including in the count. So ordering hearing aids or filling out ear mold forms, that sort of thing.
Can you give us a more exclusive, a longer list of the kinds of things you'll accept besides ordering hearing aids and ear molds?
Well, it would be things that are related to patient contact, but that you are allowed to do. So ASHA sort of is very loose in that definition, but basically anything related to patient care that occurs maybe after the patient has left. So it would include writing patient notes, or it could include writing a report, as long as it was associated with that direct patient contact. So cleaning a file cabinet would not qualify, but if it had, relevance to the appointment, then ASHA allows us to count those hours. I would imagine that most of the hours that students submit across the country do count that sort of shift time.
Do you allow them to count, or do you even have any kind of simulations or online or model use of modeling? Or?
Yeah. So ASHA says, and again, we are accredited for ASHA, so that's why I keep referencing that. They allow 10% of the total hours to be simulated hours. And you utilize those? Well, we didn't used to, but with COVID, we have been in the first 2 years. Okay, so I think we should have open it up for discussion about being able to use patient-related activities as part of our number of hours, whatever that may be, 1820, 1800, 1850, whatever we ultimately decide on, which we aren't deciding today. But right. I would like to open that up for discussion on what others think of that. I will tell you that if you counted the hours at 52, well, if you work 40 hours a week for 50 weeks, so that's a 2-week vacation, that will give you 2,000 hours. And that would require 40 hours a week of direct patient contact. So I think that probably was not the intent when that was written down as the 1820 from ASHA's point of view. Okay, I would like to open the discussion to the board members first. Before, I'm not sure if there are any other public members of the public on the call, but I would like to open up this discussion to the board members.
Hi, this is Paul, and to be clear, we're looking at the proposed statutory revisions on page 2, highlighted text in your materials.
Who was that directed to?
So what we were looking for is comments at this time from the board on the proposal that's before the board in their memo, and that's the proposed statutory revisions that are highlighted in the memo. And once we hear from the board, then we can go to public comment.
This is Todd Borges. I mean, to me, it doesn't seem to make sense to essentially have them double dip if they're doing this in the program and then essentially requiring them to do the exact same thing all over again. I certainly would be supportive of changing the language as it's written.
Any other comments or anyone who feels that there may be some drawbacks to doing this?
Hi, this is Paul again. I think at this time we may want to look at who else is with us. I know we have several members of the public that have signed on recently in anticipation of this item.
Okay, so seeing no responses from further board members, okay, Paul, to go on with asking for public comment.
Okay, so this is the moderator. I have opened up the Q&A panel for public comment. If anyone would like to make a comment, please type. I would like to make a comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. We will display instructions for your reference, and we'll give you a moment to access the feature. All right, this is the moderator, and I am actually seeing no requests for public comment at this time. Would you like me to close? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So, moderator, I apologize. It looks like we do have one request that just came in.
Thank you so much. Yes, an individual identified as Sean Bagat, and forgive me, please, if I mispronounced your name. I will let, okay. Sean, you've been unmuted.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. So, I'm Sean Bagat, and I'm the department chairperson for the Department of Audiology at San Jose State University. And I listened to Christy's comments, and I believe the faculty in our program are in agreement with Christy's comments regarding counting the pre-RPE hours as part of the total number of hours, whatever that total will end up being, 1,800, 1,850, or 1,820. I think our faculty are supportive of the idea of including some of the RPE or pre-RPE experiences, the clinical hours that Marcia mentioned. I think were estimated at 650 to 850 clinical block hours that students experienced before the RPE. I think our faculty would be supportive of including those totals in the ultimate total that happens, that is inclusive of the RPE experience.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And
to the board, I do support this, but this is Z.
Okay, this is the moderator. We have another individual identified as Margaret Winter that would like to make a comment. So, Margaret, I'll unmute you.
Thank you. I'm the clinical coordinator at the Cal State LA AUD program. And yes, I too would agree with that, counting the hours that they accrue during their program in addition to the RPE, and also to count the time that they spend that isn't necessarily face-to-face with the patient, because there's so much that audiology needs to do that is patient-related that's critically important for students and new audiologists to know how to do.
Thank you, Margaret. Okay, this is the moderator, and I see no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you.
All right, it's been done.
Is there any further board discussion?
This is Sharice, and I just wanted to clarify for the board and also for the public that right now we are discussing the statutory changes so that we can go ahead and proceed, if the board so approves, to a legislative proposal in 2021 in order to get those statutory changes moving by the end of 2021. But in the meantime, we would be addressing a lot of these details in the regulations to better define all of the acceptable types of clinical rotations and hours and any other specifics that we were discussing.
Thank you, Cherise.
Mm-hmm.
It looks, host, are you calling hands up or am I?
Usually we defer to the board president. If you need help spotting them, I'm happy to assist.
Okay, I think I can see them. I thought I saw maybe Debbie had her hand up first.
Hi, this is Debbie. It sounds reasonable to me, but I feel that some of the professional members might know more about any possible downsides than I do. But it does sound reasonable.
I would just respond to that by saying that I know that these rotations are relevant. They are supported by the didactic coursework that goes with them, and they're 100% supervised. While, yes, they are in a learning mode at that point, more so than they will be later, I think they are worthy of being counted toward the 12 months. Let's see. Rod? Dr. Diaz?
Holly, yeah. No, well, either me or Holly.
I was just trying to look at how they jumped up on my board here.
Okay, well, just to clarify for myself, so I'm in support of counting experience through the entirety of training. But just to clarify, are we trying to move now back towards hours in the verbiage, or are we still counting by months?
Yes, as far as this stipulation is by months.
Okay, so we would just expand the language to include the entirety of the training rather than just the supervised clinical rotations.
Yeah, I suspect that when all is said and done, that we will have counted the time and the hours through the entire experience, so that it will equal 12 months in terms of time in the end.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see, Holly?
Hi, I just wanted to say I think it's an excellent idea. And actually, I was just listening, so I was quiet, but then I don't know enough about the process if we should go ahead and state that we approve, or that do we have a time where you go through all of us for kind of a vote?
I believe that will be the case.
Okay.
Once we're finished with this, any discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Questions?
This is the moderator. I see Christy Kirsch has her hand up. I put her back to attendee, but if you'd like, I can unmute her.
Of course.
Okay. Christy, you've been unmuted.
Thank you. I was trying to figure out how to type in there, but this was faster. I'm just a little confused. I am not advocating that the number of hours that the students acquire in the first 3 years add to the month requirement in the RPE. So regardless of the number of hours that they might accrue during for us, the 3 years prior to their RPE, we would still want a 12-month RPE. So I just wanted to be clear on that.
That's how I envision this, that not only will hours will be counted, but time will be counted as well, so that we do keep the 12-month requirement.
Thank you. I got a little confused there, and I wanted to be clear on my end too. Thank you.
I see why we're kind of mixing a couple of things here, but what we're just dealing with now is that monthly 12-month requirement. It appears that we want to keep that on several levels. Mm-hmm.
That's correct. Yes. Thank you.
Not seeing other hands up or requests for to speak. Should we wait longer?
Hi, this is Paul. At this time, the board chair can, if there's no other discussion, can entertain a motion.
I don't see any either. This is Dee. Marcia, do you want to make the motion?
Well, I'd like to move that the board accept the changes as written in our board book to Business and Profession Code Section 2532.25.2 as stated.
Okay.
Hi, this is Paul. Just a clarification. I think we're talking about 2532.25, right?
I'm sorry if I misspoke. It is 25.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, let's call the roll. Marcia?
Aye.
Rod?
Yes.
Todd?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Holly?
Aye.
Amnon?
Yes.
Debbie?
Yes.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, and Marcia, the motion passes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. A great deal of work went into this with the people we heard today and a lot of others you've worked with. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dee.
Okay. At this time, we will go back to item number 4. And this is review and possible approval of the February 2021-2020 board meeting minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. This is Sharice. For your review and approval on agenda item 4 are the draft board meeting minutes from February 2020 to the 21st of 2020. If any board members have any changes that they believe need to be submitted, you can speak now.
I don't hear any, Sharice.
Dr. Raggio?
Yes, I was just going to say on page 2, under item 4, second paragraph, it says, Ms. Raggio stated physically present should not mean over the shoulder because that will prohibit the audiologist from performing other tasks. I think that should be clarified a little bit to say that prohibit the audiologist from being available to perform other tasks. It just reads oddly to me.
You got it. Are there any other edits or changes or clarifying questions?
Okay. Don't hear any.
If not, Board Chair, at your pleasure, we can entertain a motion to adopt the meeting minutes with Dr. Raggio's change on page 2.
Okay. I approve.
And is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We'll call for the vote. Rod, we'll start with you.
Yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Ammon?
Yes.
Debbie?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. It's been moved and seconded and passed. The next item is review and possible approval of the June 30th, 2020 Board Teleconference meeting minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. And for your review and approval are the board meeting minutes from June 30, 2020. This was the first WebEx we did. And if anyone has any edits, changes, or clarifications, if they'd like to bring those up now.
This is Marcia. I'm looking at page 12. I just have a correction under item number 8. It lists in paragraph 1 and in paragraph 4 that California Academy of Audiology noted these changes. It's actually the American Academy of Audiology, not CAA, in both cases.
Okay. Noted.
Are there any other additions or corrections? Okay. Hearing none, we'll call for the motion. For the vote, Marcia.
Yes.
Todd.
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Ron?
Abstain.
Holly?
Yes.
Amnon?
Yes.
Debbie?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. This motion passes. The next item is with Paul, and it is number 6, the Executive Officer's Report.
Hello, this is Paul. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm on item number 6, which is the Executive Officer's Report. Behind my report, there are some additional documents that I will be referring to. In your binders, they're behind tabs. And if you're looking at the PDF document, we'll just have to scroll back and forth, so just bear with me. First off, I want to just inform the board and update you on our COVID-19 plan and response. I think the last time we all met was in June, and it was very early in the process as far as making adjustments. Since that time, we have continued to promote and implement state health and safety guidelines. For a while, we were closed there. We were closed for about 3 months, but the board was able to open up based on its approved plan to DCA. Still, the last 8 months have presented some challenges. We've had to work through those restraints and adjustments during our peak licensing period, and at the same time had to implement a state employee furlough. So as you can imagine, these issues make it a little more difficult for us to stay up with our workload. I do want to commend our staff and the leadership of Sharice Burns, because we have been able to maneuver through all of this and still maintain acceptable timeframes and standards during that time. So what we have been doing is we have been rotating staff. We have a very small office, so it's really important that we rotate staff and that we telecommunicate, even sometimes when it's not the best way of doing it. We've had to prioritize health and safety and come up with creative ways to answer calls and handle the mail. For instance, we've annexed a conference room in the hallway where we have our receptionists working, and we've installed plexiglass so that the open desk that a receptionist usually has now has plexiglass. So in addition to that, we're trying to keep people updated, keep our stakeholders updated by using our website, interested party lists, and email communications to keep everyone apprised on any issues that might occur, and specifically on waiver updates and waiver issues that have come up. Before I go on to the next section, are there any questions on this? Talking about staffing, we were talking earlier about positions and VCPs. One of the positions that we were successful in attaining through the budget process was an associate governmental program analyst. That's a senior analyst position that would help us in coordinating legislation and regulation. That has been a challenge to fill. Usually individuals with this talent, it's a very competitive. So we did hold interviews. We spent a few days doing that, and I think we're still in the process of making a selection and doing all the work that's associated with that. We hope to have this position filled before the end of the year, but it is a process hiring a civil servant employee. I've also included in your materials budget documents. One of the documents behind your first tab there is the budget report, which is an expenditure projection that budget staff puts together. In addition to that, we also have a fund condition. So this is based on the best projections that we can come up with at this time. As you can see, if you look at the expenditure report, that's the table that has borders, and you probably have a colorful document in your binders. If you look at the expenditure report, you can see that we're on target to have a surplus. We usually have a surplus anywhere from 1% to 5%, but it's still very early in the budget process, and we're dealing with lots of changes. So we're going to monitor this closely with the help of our budget staff at the Department of Consumer Affairs. In addition to that, I have what we call a fund condition, an analysis of a fund condition. It looks like a balance sheet. And just to kind of explain to you, since this we'll probably touch on this when we talk about our fee increase regulations. If you look at this document, it's the second document behind my report. It says 0376 Speech Language Pathology and Audiology and Hearing Aid Dispensers Board Analysis of Fund Condition. If you look at this document, there's 3 years that are identified in the columns to the right. The prior year, 2019-20, the current year, 2021, and the budget year, 21-22. I think the important thing to look at there is, you have your carryover amounts in the top row, the top section. you have your income, your revenues, transfers, and other adjustments. And then you have the final section, which is expenditures and adjustments. So the bottom line is, if you look at our current year, you see that we project revenue to be $2.2 million. If we spent all the money in our budget, we would spend $2.4 million. That means that we would have a deficit of $200,000, and we would have to dip into our savings. So this is what you call a fiscal structural imbalance. Less money coming in than what you're projected to spend if you spend all of your budget. Typically, a board or a department like ours will not expend the entire budget, but it could happen. So the measure that we take to ensure that that doesn't happen and that we maintain a certain number of months in reserve. And let me just refer to that. At the very bottom, you have the fund balance, and it says reserve for economic uncertainties and the number of months in reserve. This is the number of months that the board can continue to operate if no other monies were coming in. So the way we keep our budget healthy is to make sure that we have the same amount of revenue that it costs us to keep our operations running. So that's why it's so important to look at our current fees and our current regulations, and we're going to be talking about that later. Before I go on, are there any questions on the last two items on administration or the budget? Since we're talking about our budget, I'll go into a couple other areas that are not in the narrative. One is, yes.
Paul, sorry, a question, Holly.
Yes.
So for the months in reserve, what is the recommended amount of months in reserve you should have ideally at a minimum?
That's a great question. And the board where I previously worked, there was a mandated amount. I mean, I don't remember exactly what it was, but I want to say it was something like up to 3 months in reserve. Typically, for larger boards, that reserve may be lower as far as the number of months. But for a board like ours, it could be anywhere from 5 to 6. And that number varies depending on who you talk to. I'm sure Teresa's also heard a different number. But typically, the idea is to have a healthy fund for economic uncertainty. So if you had 6 months in reserve, that means that you could continue for 6 months. You never want to have, an excessive amount, because if that were the case, then you need to look at your fees and maybe decide whether, you're taking in too much. And there have been situations in which boards have had to lower their fees because the income was more than what they needed.
And
yes,
this is Sharice. Oh, sorry. This is Sharice, and I would just chime in. I have everyone seems to have heard different things, but I've heard 6 months to a year as a good, healthy reserve. And then the other thing to keep in mind is that anytime the board is looking to make investments in technology and improvements, our budget comes completely from the fund. So all the licensing fees feed into that fund, and that's what filters into our budget. So we don't get to increase our budget to astronomical proportions unless the fund can support it. So obviously it's never going to be astronomical proportions, but in order to make big investments in technology and those kind of things, that's our fund condition is also a very critical piece of that.
Thank you, Sharice. Are there any other questions before I get on to these next areas? If not, I'll talk about a major project that we're taking on, and I think that part of what Sharice is alluding to is that we have a major project that we're taking on. If you read our environmental scan, you read some of the comments, you know that we are somewhat behind the times when it comes to technology, and we want to make things easier for people. We want to be efficient as an organization. So we're using what we refer to as a legacy database. It's a dated system. For those of you that have worked in I don't know if you've worked in places where you see a green screen or a dark screen. It's outdated technology. It works for us and it's stable, but we want to be able to do more as far as having automated processes and more interaction online. So in order to do that, we are moving forward in our business modernization project. And what this does is this will get us to meeting a lot of these goals. So where are we right now with this? We've been looking at studying the feasibility of moving forward. We're looking at identifying the parameters of the project and what we would be able to do. There's a lot involved in this. We could probably talk about this alone for an hour, but I'll try to keep it high level. This is what, in the past you heard of the Breeze project. This would be our version of the Breeze project, getting us on board, and we're looking at different vendors at this time. So it's very exciting because it's not exciting that we're taking on a lot of work, but this is something that has to happen. And I know that since we brought Charisse on board, this is something that we've discussed doing. We knew that this was coming, and one of the most important things is having stable funding to be able to accommodate this project. So we have to make sure that we have, enough money in our fund and enough money to be able to sustain something like this. We have a plan in place. We're trying to move forward. And as we move forward, we're going to have more information for you. We're working in coordination with the Department of Consumer Affairs. And I just want to commend their staff because they have project management staff and IT staff. We have spent probably hours just going over solutions and figuring out a way to make this happen. It's not easy for a small organization like ours to take on a project of this magnitude, but I think we've come up with a pretty good plan. We also work with the Department of Technology and obviously our budgets office here at the Department of Consumer Affairs. Are there any questions on the business modernization project?
Mm-mm.
Okay, I will move forward to another project that has to do with making sure that we're equipped to do our jobs and making sure that we have the appropriate facilities. For some time, we've been talking about relocating, and I know that we've talked about this in the past. I have good news, and that is that we're moving forward, and we're pretty far along in our project to relocate. We'll be relocating to an area that is not too far from our current office. And right now we're going through we're in a month-to-month lease in our current location, and we look to move in the spring of 2020. One of the challenges, we already had this project in the works. One of the challenges was coming back and trying to reopen, after or during the COVID situation, and just not having enough space to even socially distance. So we have arrows. You have to walk a certain way in our current office because it's so small. But we look forward to having this new facility where we'll be able to come in and have proper distancing and have all the facilities that we need to do our jobs. Another thing that we'll be allowed to do in the new location is have ongoing hearing aid dispenser practical exams, because we have a couple of examination rooms that we'll be able to use for that purpose, as opposed to kind of borrowing space and hoping that, VCA has been really kind in letting us use their facilities all this time, but we're going to have our own space. Any question before I move forward? If not, I'll talk about licensing and exam. As I mentioned earlier, we're coming out of our peak season. Peak season during a pandemic is not easy, but I have a little bit of a snapshot on page 2 of my report, so you can see where we are in just handling our workload. And again, I commend our staff for helping out. Everybody has pitched in. There were times where we had to adapt in so many ways. So just want to express my gratitude there. Another bit of good news is that we were able to conduct some practical examinations that we started in the month of October, as promised. This was to make up for examinations that had to be canceled in April and July of 2020 due to the COVID-19 restraints. So we were able to use a larger room that's here in our DCA building. We coordinated with executive staff and with everyone to make this happen. And, our staff have been really working hard to try to make all these examinations happen. So we want to, continue to seek examiners. We need all the help we can get so that we can keep up with this workload. I've also included a table on page 3 of your report that shows the results of the most recent examinations that took place during the month of October. The next section of my report deals with enforcement. We're going through this is through the first quarter of the 2021 fiscal year. We've received about close to 50 complaints and subsequent arrest notifications. I think that's probably on par with what we usually see at this time. I also included, something that you don't see as a board. You don't see citations because that process usually happens just here in the board office. You also don't necessarily see, as I mentioned in past board meetings, voluntary license surrenders or default decisions in which a licensee might say, I'm not going to go through this whole hearing process. I would rather just surrender my license at this time. Going back to the citations, I know we've issued more citations since we wrote this report, but we have issued citations for unlicensed activity and not cooperating with the board investigation. That's 4 citations as of the date of this report. One thing I want to mention about that is what we are seeing more and more of is investigations in which we ask for information of a licensee and they just don't respond. When that happens, we have no other alternative but to try to get their attention and to point out that they have violated the Practice Act, and we may choose to cite and fine someone in that situation. The other one is unlicensed activity, and I've been asked this question. The question that frequently comes up is, if some unlicensed activity is pretty egregious, what can the board do about that? Well, we only have authority to discipline our licensees. So what we typically do is we write a citation. We have the authority to cite and fine those that are unlicensed or that are practicing unlicensed. In the case of the board, many of these unlicensed practice investigations have to do with people that are working either as an aide or an assistant or are on their way to being licensed, maybe as an RPE. And at that point, the board will issue a citation and fine for preventative purposes to make sure that everyone understands that you have to abide by the law and you have to, wait until you're qualified to be licensed before you can practice. I've included in your enforcement materials the table that shows you the last 12 months of disciplinary actions that the board has taken. The next section of your report is a table that has to do with our regulations that we're taking action on. These are the rulemaking files that are moving along. As you're well aware, we have a queue of other rulemaking files that we have to, start the process on. So those are not included here, but we look forward to expanding this list in the future and having more information in these tables as far as the progress of our rulemaking files. And again, I want to echo the appreciation that was expressed earlier for our legal counsel that helps us with our regulations, Karen Halbo. She has been a great help to us and just engaged and we've probably gotten as much help in the last few months as I think I've seen since I've been with the board. So thank you, Karen, for your help. That's all I have for my report. Are there any questions at this time? Any comments? If not, then I thank you for your attention and turn it right back over to the chair. So, Dr. Parker, we're on item number 7. Would you like me to introduce the next topic?
This is the moderator. Did we want to take any public comment before we move on to item 7?
Thank you. We do need public comment.
Okay. All right. So I will open up the Q&A panel. All right. If someone would like to make a public comment, please type, "I would like to make a comment," and submit it to all panelists using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. We are displaying instructions for your reference. All right, this is the moderator. I see no request for public comment at this time. Shall I go ahead and close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's been closed.
Do we still have Dr. Parker on?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to item number 7.
Correct. Good morning, or good afternoon, I'm sorry. Good afternoon, Board Chair Parker and board members. This is Carrie Holmes, Deputy Director.
Carrie.
Oh.
I'm sorry. Can I just introduce you real quick and just...
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. I thought you were waiting on me.
I just want to introduce Carrie Holmes. She's our new Board and Bureau Relations Deputy, and she has been working closely with us. Most recently, we've been talking about getting up to speed with what we do as a board and getting her staff up to speed. So we're really glad to have her. I'll let her tell us more about herself, but she will continue working closely with us in the coming years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you again, and good afternoon. I'm Carrie Holmes, Deputy Director for Board and Bureau Relations at the Department of Consumer Affairs. Thank you so much for inviting me to provide a department update to the Speech, Language, Pathology, and Audiology and Hearing Aid Dispensers Board. I was appointed by Governor Newsom to serve as the Deputy Director for Board and Bureau Relations beginning June 1st. I most recently came from the Senate, where I was Legislative Director for Senator Jim Bell. Before my time in the legislature, I served at the Secretary of State's office as Assistant Deputy. I've always been passionate about consumer protection, and I'm very happy to be here at DCA working with all the boards and bureaus. Board and Bureau Relations is here to assist with appointments, onboarding, and training, as well as serving as a point of contact for the board's executive team. I'm part of a new leadership team, as you know. In January 2020, Governor Newsom appointed Lourdes Castro Ramirez as the new Secretary of the Business, Consumer Services, and Housing Agency. In March, Governor Newsom appointed Jennifer Simoes as DCA's Deputy Director of Legislation and Megan Allred as Assistant Deputy Director of Legislation. And finally, in July, Christine Lally joined us as the Chief Deputy Director of DCA. Now that Director Kirkmeyer has her team in place, she can devote even more time to her top priorities. One DCA priority is regulations, improving timelines and transparency. DCA's regulations unit was created by DCA Legal to directly assist boards and bureaus with regulations packages. The department also developed an online system to electronically manage and track regulations packages and streamline their review, called Sharewell. Sharewell testing with a pilot cohort is now complete. There will be regular check-ins with the pilot groups to solicit feedback, and the feedback will be evaluated to determine the next stages of the rollout. Our work continues even though COVID-19 has changed the way we do business now and in the future. DCA temporarily closed all offices to the public in March in response to state and local stay-at-home orders to help reduce the spread of COVID-19. DCA and the boards and bureaus have implemented telework plans and have required physical distancing for those employees who cannot telework. DCA offices reopened to the public on June 15th with preventative measures to safeguard the health and safety of our employees and visitors. The economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Oops, I'm sorry. I think someone might need to mute. I'm sorry to stop. The economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic and unprecedented wildfire activities are expected to last for several years. The state needs to take immediate action to reduce costs and maximize efficiencies to support all Californians. In April, DCA and all boards and bureaus worked to limit expenditures and hiring to only those necessary to support core functions and emergency response activities. Additionally, this week, DCA learned the department and all its boards and bureaus will be required to take a 5% permanent budget reduction no later than 21-22. DCA will be working with board staff immediately to identify a plan that will best fit the board's operational needs. DCA would like to thank the board and staff for your continued service despite these challenges. Lastly, I would like to update you on some of the work Board and Bureau Relations is doing to support the board's executive team, along with all Board and Bureau leaders. Board and Bureau Relations has put on 3 brown bag trainings this fall to provide executive officers the opportunity to learn and discuss best practices on topics such as appointments, managing staff remotely, and providing ADA-compliant meeting materials to board members and the public. In partnership with DCA's Solid Training Unit, board member orientation trainings have been held quarterly as remote sessions, and a new training for board presidents is in the planning stage. I look forward to getting to know you better and meeting you in person. In the meantime, if you have any questions or need anything from DCA, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you again for inviting me to your meeting. That concludes my presentation, and I will hand it back over to Board Chair Parker.
Thank you. Item number 7 is Item number 8, update on speech hearing related DCA waivers related to COVID-19 state of emergency.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Would you like to open the floor up for public comment on agenda item number 7?
Yes.
All right, this is the moderator, and I have opened up the Q&A panel. If anyone would like to make a comment, please type. I would like to make a comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference. All right, this is the moderator. I see no requests for public comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel? Okay, it's been closed.
Okay, now we can go, Dr. Parker, now we can move on to item number 8.
Okay. Update on speech and hearing related DCA waivers related to the COVID-19 state of emergency. And Paul, are you and Sharice giving us this?
Yeah, I got it. Sorry about that. Yes, thank you, Dr. Parker. This is Sharice Burns. I will go ahead and lead this conversation. So, as was reported in June, after the beginning of the pandemic and the lockdown measures, the governor provided an executive order that gave DCA the authority to waive statutory and regulatory requirements with respect to professional licenses issued pursuant to Division 2. That's the Healing Arts Boards, of which we are one. And that is really important because as it may not be very evident to the public or even sometimes to our licensees, the board cannot just waive its own statutory and regulatory requirements, which are law once they're promulgated. And so this waiver authority from the governor allows the DCA director to start a waiver process. Again, that is a DCA-wide one with, I think it's 37 or 38 boards, and so there was many waiver requests that were submitted and went through. Some of the ones that were broad and general that were done by DCA was the continuing education waiver, and that continues to push by 6 months the renewal requirements for continuing education. And right now that is waived for licensees that expire between March 31st and December 31st of 2020, and this waives those requirements up until April 21st, 2021. The other was a reactivation requirement for speech-language pathologists so that they could assist in the care and provision of services to COVID-19 patients, and it allows those with a retired, inactive, or canceled license within the last 5 years to be reactivated without the CE requirement or a fee. And then some of the DCA, or the speech and hearing waivers that were submitted, was the modification of direct monitoring and direct supervision for RPEs and SLPAs. And that was originally approved back in May, and it's been extended on July 1st and August 27th and October 22nd. You'll notice that they continue to be extended, and there has been a verbal commitment to the boards that so long as these waivers are continued to be needed to serve consumers during this pandemic, that they will continue to be approved. The next one is the modification of limitations on renewing a hearing aid dispenser temporary license or trainee license. That waiver allowed us to extend those licenses by 6 months, and that is for licensees who expire between March 31st and December 31st. This was especially important while we were not able to do the hearing aid dispenser's practical examination, and for the few months that the written examination was also closed. The board also submitted a waiver to waive the 12-month full-time professional experience requirement for audiology applicants. This waiver was denied by the Department of Consumer Affairs on May 12, 2020, and the department stated that they do not believe that waiving pre-licensure requirements such as experience or competency exams at this time is in the best interest of consumer protection. We've had many discussions on this, but there has been no movement. And then most recently, we have heard throughout the pandemic and have understood the concern and decided to go ahead and move forward after discussions at the Audiology Practice Committee to go ahead and submit on the board's behalf a waiver to waive the self-study restrictions for continuing education and continuing professional development for both the speech and audiology and hearing aid dispenser sides, and that has most recently been submitted to DCA for their consideration. Again, the board is requesting these waivers of DCA. They have a lot to review and a lot to go through, but those are where we are at right now. And if the board has any additional waiver requests as the pandemic has gone on, if there are other restrictions that cause problems with serving consumers during the pandemic, or also treating COVID-19 patients, that they make us aware of them so that we can submit additional waivers. There is no guarantee that they will be approved, but with sufficient evidence, the board is hopeful that we can get additional waivers approved, as we did early in the pandemic. And of course, we as the board will continue to advocate for the current waivers that are already approved and that have really assisted our licensees and applicants in providing services to California's consumers throughout this pandemic. So if board members would like, if there's any additional DCA waivers or if there's any additional discussion on either the waivers that have been submitted or that are pending, we can go ahead and talk about those now.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. I see on on the waivers, some of them have expiration dates. So one of them's coming up, number 4, and it says December 31st, 2020. So when it expires, how long does it take to get it renewed again, or is it just, it's automatic?
I would not say that it is automatic. I would say that the Department of Consumer Affairs is monitoring all of the waivers, and as they get close to their expiration, they make sure that they are renewing those that they believe continue to need to be in place. And so they check in with us a few weeks ahead, and they're ready to put them out ahead of time. I know that brings a little bit of concern for our licensees, and we do get an uptick in calls and emails at that time of, is it going to be extended? Is it going to be extended? But it does get extended, and we do work with DCA on getting these extended. I want to say that there's over 74 of them at this point. So they kind of are doing them on a rolling basis of making sure they're extended as they're needed.
Okay, and when they get extended, do we pick the date of the expiration, or does DCA?
DCA does.
Okay.
Hi, I have a comment. Go ahead. Yes, I'm really excited to see the modification of board continuing education requirements to remove self-study restrictions as a waiver. The impact is huge on our professions. In fact, our annual conference coming up, the convention that CASHA puts on in March, is going to be all virtual. And once a waiver is passed and people are able to count all the coursework, this is all approved coursework, that means they're going to have much more access to the continuing education they can benefit from, and therefore consumers benefit. And I had done a little bit of research looking at what other boards require, and looking at how serious the situation is for us, being restricted at this point to the 6 out of 24 hours as a limit for self-study. And I know that there was a regulation package looking at, that it was going to change it to 12, which takes a long time to process, to go through, to be complete. And excuse my terminology here. Anyway, in our ASHA actually has no restrictions on live versus self-study. In California, the OT board, all of your approved coursework can be self-study, and physical therapy board, only 4 out of their 30 hours have to be live, and that's because it's a real hands-on training. And then the psych board, these are the few that I talked to, they have 25%, they require 25% of theirs to be live, so 9 out of their 36 hours. So there is just all the reasons in the world, especially with the pandemic right now, to be asking for this waiver. That's all.
Well, we appreciate your support in that. Paul?
Yes, I just wanted to kind of echo Holly Kaiser's comment. This is it seems like it's even been a greater need with hearing aid dispensers who have even more limitations. So I think it's definitely something that is worth pursuing in the short term during the pandemic. I mean, we're looking at our regulations language for a long-term issue, but right now I know that a lot of our licensees are hurting, and we're hearing from them. So, I hope that this is something that we can accomplish as far as the waiver goes. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any additional board comment on this item? or any additional waivers that anyone wants to discuss?
Not hearing. Are we ready, Paul, to move on to item number 9?
Did I see Todd Borges has his hand raised?
Pardon?
I think Todd Borges has his hand raised. Oh, no, he doesn't. Yes, he does.
Nope, apparently I don't. I'm sorry.
Okay. I think we'll move on to comments from the public.
All right, this is the moderator. I will open up the Q&A panel. The Q&A panel is now available. If you would like to make a comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" and submit it to all panelists using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And we are displaying instructions for your reference. For the sake of time, if you could try to keep your comments to 3 minutes, that would be great. And we have a Michelle Linares that would like to make a comment. Michelle, I will let you know when you're unmuted. All right, you've been unmuted.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to echo what Paul and Holly said. Considering that ASHA will not return this year, they canceled their convention that was set to be here in Southern California. CASHA's virtual convention will be able to meet the need of a lot of the continuing ed courses that everyone so desperately needs, but to have them not count is going to be a huge barrier for us during the convention. And what we keep hearing from our membership of speech pathologists and audiologists is that this feels very restrictive and they're very frustrated with us over it. So we've gone to the steps to explain where we're at in the process. But just to say that hopefully this waiver is considered and elevated as a priority, I think it's really going to help alleviate a lot of people who are worried about their licensure, being out of compliance when it comes to their CEUs. And again, by extension, helping the California consumer be able to get treatment. That's my comment.
Thank you, Michelle. And that is it for our request for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Please.
All right, it's been closed.
Item number 9 is discussion and possible action regarding speech language pathology and audiology fees as stated in Title 16, California Code of Regulations, CC&R, Sections 1399.157, 1399.170, 13, and 1399.170.14. And Paul, are you leading this?
This would be Sharice Burns and perhaps input from our legal counsel, Karen Halbelt.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Paul and Dr. Parker. Karen, feel free to jump on in when you feel it necessary. I'm going to go ahead and give the background that at the July 18 to 19, 2019 board meeting, the board approved speech language pathology and audiology fee regulations or augmentations to the fees. And at that meeting, they decided the SLPA fees should also be lower than the speech language pathologist fees because of the salary that those people earn. And the last fee increase was for these groups was back in 2002. So the speech language pathology and audiology fee regulation package was officially noticed with the Office of Administrative Law on August 7th, 2020. The 45-day public comment period ended on September 25th, 2020. And the board received 4 public comments during the public comment period. We have summarized these comments below for you. The first one was indicating general support for a fee increase. It also expressed concern about the RPE processing times, that they are too long, and suggested that new graduates be allowed to apply before they have a supervisor identified, with the expectation that they report their supervisor after they get the job. The board staff and legal counsel have drafted a proposed response that the board appreciates the support expressed for the proposed fee increase. The board rejects the request that RPE processing times be shortened as a part of the rulemaking package. RPE processing times are not germane or relevant to this rulemaking package and would need to be addressed in a separate regulatory proposal. The proposed fee increase is required to ensure the board has sufficient resources to maintain current operations. And for that, we would reference you back to the fund condition. The next comment opposed the fee increase and stated that the proposed fee increase would significantly impact small businesses. And they stated that individual licensees and owners of private practices would be impacted, and that many speech-language pathologists and audiologists in schools or private practice do not make more than $60 per hour, or even less per hour if providing teletherapy in response to COVID-19. The commenter asserted that the income of many small businesses is a third of what was earned in 2019 and expressed concern that the fee increase would discourage practitioners from pursuing or renewing their state licenses with serious repercussions for the understaffed profession. Board staff and legal counsel have drafted a proposed comment or a response that the board rejects this comment. The current licensing fees create a structural imbalance that we talked about earlier, and the board's reserve fund is quickly depleting. The existing fees do not adequately support the board's ability to regulate the profession it is tasked with regulating. The board notes that the statutory minimum and maximums are set in statute, which is Business and Professions Code Section 2534.2, and the fees have not been increased since 2002. In 2015, the DCA Budget Office recommended the board adopt a fee increase. During the past 5 years, the board's licensing population has increased by over 30%, resulting in an increased workload along with the need for additional staff. In March of 2019, the DCA Budget Office completed another analysis of the board's fund condition and concluded that without a fee increase, the fund would be insolvent by fiscal year 22-2023. The proposed fee increase will eliminate the structural imbalance and begin restoring the board's reserve fund. The third comment we received expressed concern regarding the increase in licensing renewal fees for speech-language pathologists and audiologists. The commenter urged the board to consider the impact of the fee increase given the current health and economic crisis in the United States. The commenter stated the fee increase may deter individuals from entering the field or transferring from another state, and that this is a significant concern given the shortage of speech-language pathologists in California. The commenter recommended the increase be distributed over several cycles and measures be taken to address the needs of licensees in different financial situations. The recommended response from board staff and board legal counsel is that we reject this comment. The board does not take fee increases lightly and has not increased fees since 2002 and waited as long as possible to do so. It is extremely regrettable that there is a current health and economic crisis, but the board must increase fees now to ensure the future financial viability of the board. Finally, the board is a self-funded agency, which means the board's revenue is obtained only from its licensing fees rather than the state's general fund, which is tax revenue. There are no programs available to supplement the board's revenue if fees are waived for some licensees. The last comment we received during the comment period indicated the increase of the speech-language pathology renewal and licensing fees from $60 to $150 is not desired during the economic stress of COVID-19. The commenter travels among states working as a speech-language pathologist and says the fee increase is a burden for those working in multiple states. The commenter indicated a fee increase that granted licensure in California, Oregon, and Washington would be justified. The commenter also suggested increasing only the initial license fee and leaving the renewal fee low. Board staff and legal counsel have drafted a response that we reject this comment. The board must raise fees to ensure it can meet its consumer protection mandate and restore its reserve fund. Although it is unfortunate the country is facing economic stress due to COVID-19, the board has already delayed raising fees as long as possible. Further delays can have a detrimental impact on the board's operation. Staff is therefore recommending that the board direct staff, if they agree with the public comments as drafted, to develop the final statement of reasons and submit the necessary rulemaking documents to the Department of Consumer Affairs and agency for approval prior to sending the documents to the Office of Administrative Law for approval of the rulemaking action. Staff further recommends the board authorize staff to make non-substantive changes to the regulatory language as needed. So we would request that the board review and consider the proposed responses to public comments and discuss those at this time. And apologies if I went too fast.
And you have that exactly right, Sharice. The board has a duty to consider those comments, and staff has prepared responses for their consideration.
Okay. Paul?
Holly has her hand raised.
Okay, I'm looking for.
No, I am sorry. I forgot to take it down. I apologize.
Okay.
There. Okay, let me take it down.
Any other comments? What is our next action, Sharice?
It looks like Dr. Raggio would like to make a comment.
Oh, okay. Marcia?
I was just going to say that while I totally understand their feelings about increasing fees in the time of COVID, I really don't think we're going to lose personnel or lose licensees because of this fee increase. And since it's been almost 20 years since we increased it, I'm in support of raising the fees.
Okay. Any other comments? Did you have one, Paul?
No, I don't have a comment at this time.
Okay.
As the regulations attorney,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, as the regulations attorney, what I'm hoping to hear from the board president is I'd be willing to entertain a motion to accept these comments and following the language that's on that's how I've seen it move forward before. And then somebody raises their hand and says, I so move.
Okay. Let's follow that path. Thank you. Someone ready to make a motion?
I just want to clarify, this is Paul. Have we opened up to the public yet for public comment?
No. I don't believe we did.
Okay.
Normally after the motion.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. It's getting late in the day. So, Dr. Parker, we are entertaining a motion at this time, and then we'll open up for public comment.
Okay.
Dee, would you like me to make a motion? This is Marcia.
Yes.
Okay. I move that we adopt the responses to comments received during the 45-day comment period, and that we direct the staff to develop the final statement of reasons and delegate to the executive officer to make non-substantive changes as required to proceed with the rulemaking file in order to adopt the fee regulations.
Okay.
I second it.
Yeah. It's been moved and seconded. Any more comments? If not, we'll call the roll.
Public comment.
And start with Marcia.
Public comment is first and then the vote.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay, this is the moderator. I will open up the Q&A panel. All right, if you would like to make a public comment, please use the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and type, I would like to make a comment, and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference. Okay, an individual identified as Michelle Linares has indicated she'd like to make a comment. Michelle, you've been unmuted.
I just wanted to
to make mention that I think that the timing perhaps feels like bad form. I employ people, and while I'm able to keep my speech pathologist working, I know that their partners haven't often fared well during this period of time, and they're shouldering a bigger financial burden than they did before the pandemic, just because now they're trying to adjust to a one household income or reduced income all around. So I think it's just something to be thoughtful about. I understand the needs of a board and fees having not been raised in so long, but timing sometimes is everything, and so it's something to consider. That's my comment.
Thank you, Michelle. And we have no further comments from the public. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes.
Okay, it's been closed.
Can I make one comment before we move on with the vote? This is Paul Sanchez, and I just want to point out, just kind of in line with the responses to the comments, that part of the bigger problem that we have with our board operations are not being adequately staffed. And when you kind of look at one problem we have with applicants is applicants have to wait a long time to get their applications processed, for instance. Having adequate staff and having adequate funding will actually help us get people to work faster. That's one of the benefits that we're looking at. So I just want to add, that we have been thoughtful. We've taken all of this into consideration in drafting this package, this language. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
I see Sharice has her hand up too.
And to just echo Paul's comments and also be cognizant that not everybody will realize the regulatory process and timing. Even moving forward now, it is potentially another 6 months or so before this fee increase would go into effect. The regulations, in order for the fees to change, have to go all the way through the finalizing process and through the Office of Administrative Law. So this isn't a fee increase you're going to see in the next couple of months, and hopefully that may have some effect as we see some relief next year of COVID-19 due to vaccines.
Okay. Thank you.
This is Paul, so just process check. I think we have a motion and a second. We've had discussion. Are we ready to take roll?
Yes.
Okay, so Dr. Parker, you can go ahead and call the roll.
All right. Marcia.
Yes.
Todd.
Yes.
Karen.
Yes.
Rod.
Yes.
Holly.
Yes.
Amnon.
Yes.
Debbie. And I vote
Yes.
I vote yes as well. The motion passes. Paul, at this point, would it be possible to take a break?
Yes, that's up to you, Dr. Parker. If you want to take a quick break right now, we can do that.
Thank you. 10-minute break. Hi, Paul. I am having an awful time seeing. Oh, okay.
Hello, everyone. This is Paul. Just want to make sure that we have everyone back. And it looks like we do. Moderator, can you confirm that we have everyone back?
Sure. We can just go down the list, and just people can unmute themselves. So Amnon, are you back? So Amnon, if you're back, can you unmute yourself? Okay. All right. So
I wish you could check in. Sorry.
It might be a good thing to do just a little roll call. So I can go down the list if you like.
Okay. I can do that for you.
Okay.
I'll just go down alphabetically. I think we were calling Amnon. Amnon, are you on?
Yes,
okay,
I'm on.
Amnon is on. Debbie Snow?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Dr. Parker?
Yes.
Okay. Holly Kaiser?
Yes.
Karen Chang?
Yes.
Dr. Rajo?
Yes.
Dr. Diaz?
Present.
And Todd Borges?
Present.
Okay, we're going to make one quick change. Bear with us. We're going to go to item 16, and then we'll be coming back to item number 10. So if we could move to item 16. Item 16 is board election of officers. The board is required to annually elect officers for the position of chairperson and vice chairperson. The last time we elected officers was approximately 1 year ago at our October 2019 meeting. Our current board officers are our board chair, Dr. D. Parker, and our vice chair, Dr. Marcia Rajo. First off, I just want to, as the executive officer, express my appreciation for Dr. Parker for all of her help. Since I've been on the board as a board member, but especially these last 2 years as a board chair, the board chair is someone who works closely with the executive officer. So I'm full of appreciation for the 2 years that she has served as the board chair. Today, we're looking to elect a board chair, and the board chair is responsible for making sure that all the board's business is conducted in a professional manner with the appropriate transparency, and making sure that we develop agendas and that we keep the business of the board moving forward, also chairing the meetings and working closely with a board management staff and legal counsel. On top of other things, the board chair oversees the work of the executive officer. So at this time, I'm going to entertain nominations for the position of board chair for this coming year. Again, I'm entertaining nominations from board members for the position of board chair.
I haven't spoken to her about this, but I nominate Marcia Raggio.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I second.
Yeah, second. Sorry.
Marcia, Dr. Raggio, do you accept the nomination?
I do. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other nominations for board chair at this time? Okay, at this time, I will do a roll call, and we'll hold a vote. Dr. Parker?
Yes. Yes.
Todd Borges?
Yes.
Karen Chang?
Yes.
Dr. Diaz?
Yes.
Holly Kaiser?
Yes.
Amnon Shalev?
Yes.
Debbie Snow?
Yes.
Dr. Raja?
This seems weird, but yes.
Okay. Well, again, thank you, Dr. Parker, for serving as a board chair for these past 2 years. You all have a choice if you want to pass over the gavel and do the rest of the meeting. I see our legal counsel has his hand raised. Joseph?
Yeah, hi, Paul. I just wanted to make sure that the minutes reflect accurately what just happened. So you took a roll call to ensure the quorum was present, but the motion was not actually put to vote yet. And I would encourage the board to open the floor for public comment before the motion.
Thank you. Thank you. As you can see, that's I struggle to remember the public comment portion of this, which it's my job to make sure that we have public comment. So excuse me for that. Can we open it up for public comment now, moderator?
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I've opened up the question and answer panel. So if anyone would like to make a public comment, please type, "I would like to make a comment," using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and send it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference. This is the moderator. I see no requests for public comment at this time. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's been closed.
I'm going to do that vote again. This is actually the official vote for the nomination and position of board chair, and that nomination is Dr. Marcia Raggio. So I'll go ahead and go down the list. Dr. Parker.
Yes.
Todd Borges.
Yes.
Karen Chang.
Yes.
Dr. Diaz.
Yes.
Holly Kaiser.
Yes.
Amnon Shalev.
Yes.
Debbie Snow.
Yes.
And Dr. Raja.
Yes.
Okay, so the vote is unanimous. Dr. Raja will be serving as the incoming board chair. We also have, congratulations, Dr. Raja.
Thank you.
We also have the role of the vice chair, and this person, this individual performs the duties and responsibilities of the chair when the chair is absent or assists with tasks as delegated by the board chair. At this time, we're open for nominations for the position of vice chair.
I would like to nominate Holly Kaiser.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Who was that seconded?
D.
Okay. So we have a a nomination and a second. Are there any other comments from the board members? If none, Holly Kaiser, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, thank you. I do.
Okay, at this time, we're going to open it up for any comments from the public.
Thank you. This is the moderator, and I've opened up the Q&A panel. We'll give you a moment to access it, and we are displaying instructions. This is the moderator. I see no requests for public comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's been closed.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to do a roll call vote for the position of Vice Chair and the nomination of Holly Kaiser as Vice Chair. Dr. Parker?
Yes.
Dr. Raggio?
Yes.
Todd Borges?
Yes.
Karen Chang?
Yes.
Christy Cooper? I'm sorry, Dr. Diaz?
Yes.
Holly Kaiser?
Yes.
Amnon Shalez? Yes. And Debbie Snow?
Yes.
Well, thank you and congratulations, Holly Kaiser, for your election to the position of Vice Chair.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
At this time, Dr. Parker, would you like to hand the gavel over to Dr. Raggio?
Absolutely, positively.
Thank
Dr.
you,
Raggio, if you can
Congratulations.
Thank you, Dee. We'll talk soon, okay?
Okie dokie.
Dr. Raggio, we are now on item number 10.
Okay. So item number 10, update, discussion, and possible action regarding regulations as a result of AB 2138, licensing boards, denial of application, revocation, or suspension of licensure, criminal conviction, as stated in Title 16 California Code of Regulations, Sections 1399.132, 133, 134, 156.1, 156.2, and 156.3. I assume someone else is going to, Sharice, are you going to discuss this item?
Yes, I am, Dr. Raggio. Thank you. So this is just an update on our AB 2138 regulation package, which is about denial of application, revocation, or suspension of licensure and criminal convictions. And so as you remember, you all might remember, back in March on the 6th, we noticed the original regulation proposal and the 45-day public comment started. It ended on April 20th, 2020. On June 30th, at that board meeting, the board reviewed the one public comment and rejected that comment and made additional changes to the regulatory text. And we went out for an additional 15-day public comment, which ended on July 17th, 2020. No additional public comment was received on those regulations. And the regulation package then proceeded through the final regulatory review process through DCA, the Department of Consumer Affairs, and our agency, which is the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency. It was submitted to agency on October 12th for final review, and it was approved by agency on November 10th. We are very happy to report that on the 18th, the board submitted the package to the Office of Administrative Law. And so the Office of Administrative Law now has, I'm going to get this wrong because I believe there's a waiver. Normally it's 30 days, but they probably have additional time. Correct me if I'm wrong, Karen, to approve this package.
Yeah, they have actually a very long time. It's 30 working days, not calendar days. And then on top of that, because of the governor's issued waivers, they have an additional 120 days. However, at this point, there are 20 AB 2138 packages going through OAL. They have a pretty standardized way of looking through things, and hopefully they won't take the full amount of time.
So that is the update. That is a monumentous achievement to get to OAL. It is a long slog to get from the proposed language at the board in the beginning all the way through to this submitting to the Office of Administrative Law. Again, the Office of Administrative Law isn't looking at the policy per se, but that we follow the Administrative Procedures Act and those criteria and all the public notice and comment periods. And so very excited at this moment, very grateful to Karen Halvo for helping us get through to that finish line. And we will keep you apprised of any updates from the Office of Administrative Law or anyone else along the way. So hopefully at our first board meeting next year, maybe we'll have news.
Well, congratulations.
That's all I have for this item.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Okay, since we don't need to do anything more with that one, I'd like to move on to item 11, discussion and possible action on board proposed legislation regarding BPC sections 2838.35 and 2539.4 relative to locked hearing aids disclosure from hearing aid dispensers and dispensing audiologists.
Dr. Raggio?
Yeah.
Hi.
Pardon?
Hi, Dr. Raggio. This is Joe, board counsel. On item 10, let's open it up for public.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
We get us on that every time. Yes, can we do that?
Thank you so much. This is Matt, and I have now opened up the Q&A panel for comment. All right, this is the moderator. I see no request for public comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes.
Okay, it's been closed.
Okay, so continue with item 11 then, as already stated. This is an issue that we've been talking about for some time, and the problem, as you can see by the background, is that there are certain agencies that dispense hearing aids with programming software, and you probably know that all hearing aids are programmed digitally these days. And these particular entities have what are called proprietary software. So that means that a person who purchases a hearing aid from such a location or a facility is unable to go anywhere else to have their hearing aid programmed. And that becomes a consumer access problem if the company goes out of business or the individual moves away or something like that. So we saw it as a problem with locked hearing aids, meaning locked programming software. So I worked with Todd Borges and board staff to develop changes to the Business and Professions Code Section 2538.35, as you can see in your board book under tab 11. And what we're asking, or what we're stating in this proposed change, I'll read it for you, is for purposes of this section, proprietary programming software refers to software used to program hearing aids that is supplied by a hearing aid distributor or manufacturer for the exclusive use by affiliated providers. This software is considered locked and inaccessible to non-affiliated providers. Locked, non-proprietary software refers to software that any provider can render inaccessible to other hearing aid programmers. A licensee shall, prior to the sale of a hearing aid that uses programming software that is constituted to be inaccessible to any provider, provide the consumer with a written notice in 12-point font or larger that states the following. The hearing aid being purchased uses proprietary or locked programming software and can only be programmed at specific facilities or locations. The written notice must be signed by the consumer prior to the purchase and kept and maintained with the records pursuant to Section 2538.38. The identical language can be found in 2531.1 through 2539.14 that states the same for dispensing audiologists as it is for hearing aid dispensers. So we have worked on this diligently to try to make it equitable and fair to the consumer. So this is our proposed language that Todd and I and staff have agreed on. So I'd like to open the floor to discussion by board members.
Hi, this is Karen. I think this is a great step in the right direction. However, I've thought about this a lot, and we can start off with this, but one of my things is I think I've asked before, is there any way to unlock it and then they can go to any hearing aid dispenser to get their hearing aids fixed?
Not per se. However, rumor has it, and I've actually spoken to the folks who administrate the Costco hearing aids, and they claim that if a dispenser called their corporate office in Washington State, that they would send them the software. But that was not the case for all the other companies that I spoke to. They were not willing to do that. So I don't think you can unlock it per se. Now, in terms of the individuals who are not using non-proprietary but have the ability to lock software, presumably the patient or the wearer could go back to that person and ask them to unlock it so that they could seek programming elsewhere. But it doesn't seem to be an easy process or a readily accessible one.
Okay. Yeah, I thought about this a lot, and I just think it's very unfair for the consumer to have to purchase a locked hearing aid and then say that, dispenser goes out of business or whatnot. Now they're SOL.
Right, and that might force them into having to purchase a new hearing aid when they perhaps don't need one.
Exactly. My other question would be probably to Paul or Sharice I noticed that we have a lot of, but they're on our written notice to consumers. How long are the pages of these warnings and information? So we're going to have another one, which means the hearing aid being purchased uses proprietary or locked programming. What other things do we have on there?
Hi, this is Paul. Are you referring to the contract, the sales contract?
Yeah. So when I purchase a hearing aid, how thick is the contract?
This is something that actually probably Todd or Dr. Rajo could tell us more. I believe it depends, but it could be 1 to 2 pages. Am I right about that?
Well, currently it's typically a single page. However, a couple of years ago, we had to make some amendments for people who were had to turn in their hearing aid during the trial period to have it repaired or something like that, and we wanted to toll that time that it was out of their hands. So we had to have an additional kind of an addendum document that they signed that recognized that and give them additional time on their trial. So presumably something like this could be done. I presume. I'd like to hear what Todd thinks.
I would agree. It would have to be probably an additional page right now with the constraints of the purchase agreement being a particular font size, especially with the declarations are on there now. Unless they went to a legal size, which you could easily do, but most places do not. They keep it 8.5 by 11. It would probably need to be an additional page that they would have to go over with the patient and have them sign.
Okay, so basically about 2 pages of wording.
Yes. The one that Marcia referred to, if it goes out for repair during the trial period, that's something that you don't use unless it goes out, so it makes sense for that to be completely separate. So that's something that in most cases isn't even really used, generally speaking. So having this one little piece of paper for them to sign, I don't see that as being a real constraint at all to the stakeholder or the consumer.
Okay. And Todd, how often do you see this issue come up?
With some regularity, quite honestly, whether it's someone from the VA or someone from a franchise location. I just had someone in my practice just this week who got hearing aids from a business that is no longer in business. They sold, and those hearing aids aren't available, and there's nothing I can do for that person other than provide them a new instrument. And the hearing aids they have are, I think they were just 2 years old. And I can't even go in and turn it up or turn it down or do anything to it. So it can be fairly egregious.
Right. So do you think this goes further, that this, like, you know, put some teeth into it, goes further enough for this issue or this problem?
Well, I don't know how much further we could take it. Yeah. I mean, it is notifying them that, you know, by the way, you're married to us now forever, as long as you have the hearing aid.
Right.
And I don't see what we could do beyond that, honestly.
Because it's the businesses that hold the proprietary software, and it's the businesses the hearing aid company. Right.
Correct.
It's I guess it's kind of like if you have an Apple, you have to like go with Apple products and Apple stuff.
Right. I mean, the assumption is, if we use Costco as the example, if someone bought the hearing aid from Costco or wherever, odds are they're going to continue to go back there and get it serviced. And in a case like a Costco or something like that, they're probably not going to close.
Right.
So I don't think there's necessarily, I don't think we have to worry about that we're unnecessarily putting fear into the person, you know, to get them to reconsider. I don't think that's it at all. I think it's just they need to know if they move or, you know, they leave town, and, you know, they may not be someplace close to them that can help them anymore. And it's important they understand that.
Okay.
This is Marcia. I have a couple comments also. I'm not sure, and maybe somebody else knows, that the font size that's required on the delivery receipt at this point typically refers to the Song-Beverly statement on there. I'm not sure about the rest of the document, though. Would anybody know?
You're correct.
Is it only Song-Beverly, or is it the whole thing?
As I recall, it's just the Song-Beverly where it has to, but I think it's 12 point.
Okay, so it could be that some manipulation of the single sheet could be undertaken so long as that maintains the 12-point font to make it all fit on one page. That certainly would be more convenient for them than having to come up with another piece of paper.
It's certainly possible. Yeah, or they could go to a larger, like a legal size sheet if necessary. I mean, it's possible to keep it to one page, one way or another.
Hi, Dr. Raja. Can I just clarify your question? You were asking about the 12-point font applying to this notice, right?
Yes. That's required there, but also we were talking about the practicality, the logistics of putting it on the current delivery receipt and how realistic that is if the entire document has to be 12-point font. If it's just these two items, the Song-Beverly and the item we're discussing here, and the rest of it doesn't, perhaps there is a way to massage the print so that it can all be on one page.
I see. Thank you.
I just wanted to bring up the fact that I did speak with her. I shouldn't say I spoke with them. I called Miracle Ear because that's definitely a proprietary software, and I called them probably 3 or 4 times, and nobody would ever respond. So I never heard back on whether they would be willing to share their software with others, or how they felt about this action, just as an FYI. Any further board discussion? Can we open this up for public comment?
This is the moderator. Thank you, Madam Board President. I will open up the Q&A panel. If you would like to make a comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" in the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and send it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference. This is the moderator. I see no requests for public comment at this time. Would you like me to close the Q&A? Oh, we've got one. So I will, we have a Marnie Novak that would like to make a public comment. So Marnie, you've been unmuted.
Hi, this is Marnie Novak. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, yes. I just wanted to make a public comment. This is a topic that's really near and dear to my heart, along with a lot of audiologists in the state of California. And it's not just with Costco or Miracle Ear. There's a multitude of places like New Ear, which is owned by Starkey, Audibel, AccuQuest. And a lot of those places will not offer or allow the devices to be unlocked, even if you call in and request it. So even if some of those retail centers close up, the patient, unfortunately, is out of luck and then gets stuck with having to purchase a new set of hearing aids, even if they have purchased it maybe a year or two ago. And I will tell you that I personally, in the 20 years as an audiologist, and in the last 10 years alone, I have seen at least 1 or 2 patients a month with this situation. And it's really unfortunate because it really does cause consumer harm, because not only do they spend thousands of dollars for hearing aids, they have to spend thousands of dollars for hearing aids again within such a short period of time. And I don't think it's going to be that difficult to add a little bit of language on the purchase agreement, because for the Song-Beverly Act, I think that one only has to be 10 point or 12 point. I was looking that up. But I think it would be very easy to add some language and have the consumer perhaps initial off on it so they're aware that they've been told and they initial to the fact that they've been told. But that's all I wanted to say, that I would be in support of hoping that the board moves in the direction of putting that language on a purchase agreement. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Marnie. All right. This is the moderator. I see no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you.
All right, it's closed.
So it looks like, is there any other board comment before we talk further?
I have one more comment. What would be the possibility? We could go ahead and vote on this, but what would be the possibility of doing a legislation that requires these big companies like Miracle Ear, Smarky, or whatnot, if a hearing aid was to be purchased in California, they are required to provide the software if a situation happened where the hearing aids are locked and they can't get it to open to it with another audiologist. Is that possible?
I don't know. It feels to me like there's a lot. That's a heavy lift to do that, because if we look at any company who has, restraint of trade issues or labeling issues and things like that, I think it would be very difficult to go that route. I don't know, though. I defer to people who know more than I.
Like maybe would Heather know, or Sheree?
Can you repeat the question, please?
What is the possibility of being able to say something, try to put forth a legislation that says, if you were to purchase a hearing aid in the state of California, these companies are required to unlock them if needed, without saying you need to buy another hearing aid.
No, I too would have to. I think we'd have to look at this further, the legalities of that.
Mm-hmm.
What we have jurisdiction over is licensees and not manufacturers. So at this point, what we're trying to do is address the problem of consumers not being notified. Most of the complaints that we have dealing with hearing aids have to do with just a lack of notice or transparency, whether it's the warranty, whether it's the locked hearing aid, or whether it's a credit agreement. So doing this would address that and at least provide the consumer the notice that they deserve when making this purchase.
Right. I understand that. Like, we need to provide the notice and let them know. But I feel like it's still kind of, and we might not have the power to do so, but I still feel like it's sort of still unfair because they still have to purchase a hearing. They still have to purchase a hearing aid, whether or not they want to, or, they need a hearing aid. So, that's just my thing, but yeah.
If I could speak, I'm sorry. If I could speak from a practicality standpoint, it's not just about having providing the software, but then they'd have to provide training. Each software is a little bit different, and if I suddenly have access to Beltone and AccuQuest and Miracle-Ear and all of these others, the software may not look like the fitting software to, say, the generic version, if you will. And so then that would require the manufacturer to then have to provide training to us as well to be able to use their software. So that creates a whole other level of complication and requirement on them to kind of support people beyond their organization.
And this is Cherise. And so since the regulation of those external businesses and their proprietary software is pretty far outside of the board's jurisdiction and reach, it may be one of the things that maybe we can bring up as an issue in our sunset review to the Business and Professions Committee, that this is like an external issue that is impacting the profession, but that that kind of tips the legislature off that maybe somebody else might want to take this up, just due to it being so far outside of our own jurisdiction to regulate licensees. But when you get into business and professions, legislation, they have a little bit more to go in that, and in the commercial code. So maybe that's an issue we can bring up, and that can be.
Yeah, I think we can do that. We should do that.
Well, luckily, we start that process early next year. And
all right.
We will be going through the fun of sunset and all the other normal issues, but in the sunset, there is always a section that the board can bring up issues in its professions and in the field for consideration, and that's one of the items you could bring up as well.
I think we would get this is Marcia, pretty serious pushback from the manufacturers, because they not only provide proprietary software, they provide proprietary hearing aids. And the fact that they sell to people who are not a member, for example, Costco, just to a private dispenser. They also sell to Costco, but they don't sell them the same products. There are differences, and thus differences in sophistication and cost and so on. So yes, we could get the software, be trained on it and all that, but I don't think they want that cat out of the bag in particular. So we should be prepared for the pushback that's going to come if we try to do that. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. Is there any other board comment? If not, I would move ahead to our requested action that we need a motion to adopt the legislative language and direct staff to find an author for the legislative proposal. Would somebody like to propose that motion?
I'll propose that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, do we have any, I think, Mr. Chin, do we go to public comment at this point rather than take a vote?
I think you opened the discussion up for public comments already. If you want to restate the verbiage of the motion again so that the record is clear and then reopen for public comments, I don't see the harm in that.
Okay. The motion is to adopt the legislative language as written and direct the board staff to find an author for their legislative proposal. So having restated that, I'd like to open for public comment.
Thank you, Madam Board President. I have opened up the Q&A panel. If anyone would like to make a comment, please type, "I would like to make a comment," using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions. All right, this is a moderator. I see no requests for public comment at this time. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's been closed.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we accept the motion. So I'd like to call for a vote. I'm reading along my list at the top here, so I hope I've got everybody. Todd Borges?
Yes.
Karen Chang?
Yes.
Amnaj Shalev?
Yes.
Debbie Snow?
Yes.
Dee Parker? Is Dee still on the call?
This is moderator. She is showing up, but she's muted.
Holly Kaiser?
Yes.
And this is Marcia. I vote yes. Just wait to see if Dee.
Sorry. I'm sorry. This is the moderator. I can unmute her. So Dee, you're going to be unmuted.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you. So the motion passes. Okay, I'd like to move on to, we've already discussed number 12, so we're going to go to number 13, which I believe Charisse is going to discuss. Discussion and possible action on board proposed legislation to address emergency waiver authority for the board.
Thank you, Dr. Raggio. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, the board realized very quickly and started collecting and all of the statutory and regulatory sections that board staff and board members and licensees had mentioned that might need to be waived during the pandemic in order for licensees and applicants to continue to provide consumer services during the pandemic and to continue to provide the continuity of care to those consumers. And of course, the big caveat being the board cannot waive its own statutory and regulatory requirements without statutory authority to do so or a executive order allowing the board in particular to waive those. So we did have to rely solely on the Department of Consumer Affairs Waiver Authority and their approval process. And they, of course, had many, many boards with many, many requests. And so although they did a very good job of quickly putting out a process and form for us to submit the waiver request, there was lots of boards with lots of waiver requests to be considered, and it took a considerable amount of time in order for some of our waivers to be approved. So some of these did result in significant delays and denials of board requests. Some of these that have really negatively impacted applicants in the form that, by the time the telesupervision waiver was approved, some applicants had lost a few weeks or more of supervised professional experience. And of course, that meant that they had to extend their RPE, which included an application and a fee. The board also was denied the 12-month waiver for audiology applicants. And the CE requirement did not waive the self-study. So in light of all of those considerations and the fact that, providing DCA that authority, there's quite a few boards and quite a few waivers. The board executive staff have discussed recommending the addition of a statutory provision. Another board, I believe it's the Contractor State Licensing Board, or is it Pharmacy? I can't remember which one it is. They do have some authority to waive their own Practice Act provisions, so the statutory or regulatory provisions. Now, because we lack that authority, we're proposing some statutory language to give the board that sort of limited authority during a declared federal, state, or local emergency to waive any application or provisions of the chapter if, in the board's opinion, the waiver will aid in the provision of health services to California consumers during the declared emergency. And that the board would waive these application provisions of the chapter or any regulations that we've adopted at an appropriately noticed public board meeting and post any of those approved waivers on its website. So following along similarly to DCA is posting those waivers on a publicly accessible website, but also taking those actions at a publicly noticed board meeting where there can be input. And then also having the caveat to that being that if the board needs to continue a waiver for up to 60 days after the termination of a declared emergency, that it can do so. So this would not only aid in any future, I hate to even say it, pandemic or epidemic, or even in the case of local wildfires where different areas of the state have had a declared state of emergency and need waivers for those licensees impacted in that local jurisdiction. This would aid in those kind of waivers and give us the flexibility to waive these requirements when the situation necessitates it. And so I know we're not the only board looking at doing this. So we wanted to bring it to the board as a potential proposed statutory revision to bring up next year. The legislative session for 2021 will start up in earnest in January, and so we would hope to submit this and maybe work with the business and professions committees to see about receiving this sort of limited emergency authority. And so at this time, it'd be great to hear from board members whether they think this kind of emergency authority would be warranted and a good idea to pursue.
Hi, this is Marcia. Sharice, forgive me if you've already said this, but have other boards been successful in submitting this and getting waiver authority?
The boards that I know that are pursuing it are discussing it at their fall meetings right now as well.
Okay.
So the ability to pass this legislation is unknown. We could run into hurdles, but we don't think it's a horrible idea to bring up to the legislature and the business and professions committees that there might need to be some small or even limited ability to waive some of our requirements in these situations. We've never seen something so big as obviously this pandemic this year, but there have been smaller instances where it would be helpful to not have to write in little caveats into each and every regulation that says we have the authority to waive our own regulations, and instead have some sort of emergency waiver authority.
Do you think there's any wisdom in perhaps not trying to change this right away, but rather see the depth and breadth of this pandemic before trying to move forward with it, trying to gain more, I guess, support for the notion that we should have this authority?
Hi, Dr. Rajo. This is Paul. And by the way, I think Holly Kaiser also has her hand raised. I don't want to jump in.
Sorry.
You want to hear from Holly first. Let it go.
Okay. Holly?
Yes, thank you. I guess I don't see the downside to this. I understand, but your question about whether it would be helpful to wait and to see what happens, if it could be a better time. I mean, it's an interesting thought, although I think there might be more impetus right now when we're in the midst of such a difficult time, and it has such a domino effect if we're having a hard time with renewing licenses when, for example, the schools are having a hard time trying to figure out how they're going to provide services, all our medical settings. So to me, I see more benefits to trying to put this forth right now while everybody is so aware of what a huge issue this is and that we have to be poised to be able to react more quickly.
Hi, this is Paul. I think that just to kind of put in perspective, I think that the one board that I know of, and I haven't done a study on all the boards and who has this, but the one board that I know that does have this is the Board of Pharmacy. And I think that one thing that's looked at is prescribing drugs could be a matter of life and death for some people. I do think that it might be a steep hill for us to climb, but we do have time. I think we have time to look into this more, and we also have our sunset coming up. So I don't know if, as far as the time frames go, if that's something that would work along with our sunset review legislation.
Is there something, I don't know, would it have more teeth if it's in the sunset review?
I think it's important. I think it's important on its own as it is. I think it's just a matter of whether we would be successful in making it happen. Because today, I think we're just bringing the issue up for discussion and wanted to hear from the board as far as the board's thoughts.
And this is Sharice, and I would just bring up that usually when an issue is critical as it is now, and the legislature is working towards solutions related to the pandemic this year and next year, that's the only reason it seems like a good time to at least bring up the issue and try. And sunset usually, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, but in my experience, you don't want to bring up too controversial of issues in your sunset for legislative purposes because you want to be renewed. So you don't put potentially controversial items in your sunset.
Well, we're talking about probably two different things. One is a sunset trailer bill, and then the other is talking about an issue that might be of interest to the committee. And this may be an issue. I could see where some may feel that the current process is already in place and works for for the boards. So I think that, there may be an uphill climb with this. Maybe seeing how things go and coming back and saying, I don't think we're going to forget about the pandemic 5 months from now. I don't think we're going to forget about it 6 months from now. I think the impact will still be there. We're going to be feeling this devastation for a long time. So my thought is maybe this is something that the board would be able to discuss during sunset, because it did create some issues for us.
This is Marcia. I'm just curious whether a bill like this would have, excuse me, more power if there were multiple boards who are all submitting together. And I don't know even the reality of doing that. Is that something that's ever happened before, that multiple healing arts boards work together for this, for a particular end?
Occasionally, yeah. Some boards do unite for different packages. It is probably true that most boards, if they are going to be asking for this authority, are going to talk to the business and professions committees first to see if anyone in the committees that is kind of more closely related to the department and our boards would like to champion this idea or even include it as an omnibus proposal if they believe it's impacted enough boards and that it's been brought up by enough boards. So there's kind of a variety of routes, honestly.
Yeah, and I would add to that sometimes that type of effort is a result of sunset reviews, because these issues, I imagine, are going to come up in these coming reviews.
And this is Sharice, and I would say that we do know that boards that were up for sunset in 2020 that had to be postponed due to the pandemic, I believe they got supplemental questions from the committee related to COVID-19. And so those sunsets, as they become public and available, will also show those questions that the committee asked in regards to COVID-19. And I would presume some of those questions relate to the waivers.
Paul, this is Dee, and having gone through the last sunset review, I agree with your the comments that you've just made.
Thank you.
Sharice, this is Marcia. Did you recommend that we do talk to the B&P committee before moving forward? Did you say that earlier?
So this is one of those pieces of legislation that personally I believe you would shop the business and professions. You call it shop, but you're looking for an author. But you would look at the business and professions committees first, because they're more tied into what we're doing and how we regulate the professions. And so you would generally want to look for these kind of issues to the committee first. And if there's enough boards doing it, there might be kind of a discussion worth a discussion of combining efforts or what kind of legislation could move forward that way. So that would be my plan if we were to approve it. But there is that other option to not pursue it as standalone legislation, but to bring it up in our sunset review, which we will be developing the report next year. But again, that report will be developed in 2020, and then the hearings will be in the report will be developed in 2021, and the hearing will be in 2022. This is Sharice. I'm sorry, I missed that comment.
I don't think there was one, actually.
Oh, okay.
So our action requires, after this discussion, that these statutory changes and be approved and delegated to the executive officer or his designee to find an author. It feels like we may not be ready to go to that step, but I want to throw it out there again to see how people feel about the suggested action.
I would agree with it.
That we would go forward with seeking a legislative author and a bill?
Yes.
And that was
Todd.
Okay.
Though I will have this one caveat. I have no issue with it also going to sunset and pursuing that as well. I can certainly see the value of that.
Holly?
Yes. Well, I'm listening to all the comments about this and some of the value of waiting, perhaps, in gathering more information and maybe the strength of other boards that might be proposing something similar. My question then is, if we did decide to go ahead and put this forth on our own and not wait for that, but it gets turned down, what is the negative of that? Because if there is a negative to that and you don't want to revisit it after it's been pushed back upon, I guess I'd like to learn more about that.
I don't know if Charisse wants to comment on that, but I would imagine it's just a matter of prioritization, where we put our resources.
Absolutely, Paul. This is Charisse. So in this discussion, it would be that we're not going to seek a statutory wholesale waiver for emergency authority, but the board might want to look at its regulations and determine if there are portions that we should have clauses that allow us to waive just the regulations, maybe not the statutory requirements, but our own regulations. Just like your CE and CPD have exclusion or exception clauses for total physical or mental disability. Maybe we look at something about states of emergency or things like that allow certain specific and only those regulation pieces to be waived. But that would be something the board would look at later on, so after it has been denied.
It feels like my instinct sort of to defer to Paul's take on this, and that I think we want to put our efforts into something we thought could be fairly successful right off the bat, and that doesn't quite feel like we might be there yet.
No, I would suggest that perhaps this is something that Charisse and I can look further into and discuss it, at a future board meeting. Where are we with time frames? If I could ask Charisse on the legislative time frames.
So, in looking at prior years, of course, because odd years and even years are different for legislative sessions, in the 2019 session, which we've modeled after the 2021, usually the first month of the year is dedicated to just getting bill language into legislative council. So somewhere towards the end of January will be the deadline to put a bill into legislative council, and then all bills have to be introduced by the end of February. The one caveat I would say to this whole situation is the business and professions committees create omnibus bills that are usually introduced as spot bills early in the session, and then as they decide what's going to be included in an omnibus, those provisions will move forward. But different legislators, different staffers, all of that can determine how much big wholesale kind of changes like this versus small, less controversial changes will get into omnibus bill because it's usually supposed to be not too controversial. Just depends. So there is always wiggle room, but we can always take a much more moderated approach and begin discussions with Business and Professions Committee over the break, over the recess that they're in right now.
Since we know that, this is Paul again, since we know that other boards are pursuing this, maybe we could use this time to find out what direction other boards are taking, and that'll also give us time to kind of consider this legislation and allow Sharice and I to work together on this.
That seems like a reasonable approach to me. Do we have further board discussion about it?
So if there's no motion, or if everyone is okay with that, there doesn't have to be a motion, and I think we can table it and bring it back.
Should we entertain any public comment about it before we table it?
Yes. Okay, this is a moderator, and I have opened up the Q&A panel. If you would like to make a comment, please type, "I would like to make a comment," using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions. All right, this is the moderator. I see no requests for public comment at this time. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's been closed.
I'd also like to suggest that we take a short bio break at this point. Would 10 minutes be enough? We have quite a bit to cover still, and it's 4 o'clock.
Yes, I think so.
10 minutes, everybody? Okay, thank you. I'm back. This is Marcia.
This is the moderator, and I am back as well.
Present.
This is Debbie. I'm back.
This is Karen. I'm back.
This is Sharice.
This is Paul. I'm here.
Hi, it's Rod. I'm back.
Hi, this is Paul. I think we're ready to continue.
Okay, I'd like to move on to agenda item 14, legislative report, update on proposed legislation, and I believe Sharice is going to be discussing this.
Thank you, Dr. Raggio. So the legislative session for 2020 has ended. All of the bills that made it through the 2019-2020 legislative sessions have now chaptered. All the rest have died along the way. Upcoming December 7th, the legislative session will reconvene. Usually this is kind of organizational. Sometimes a couple of bills will be introduced, but a lot of it is choosing committees and committee chairs and much more the organizational side and kicking things off, and then they usually start up in earnest in January. So January 1, 2021 is when most statutes take effect, unless they have a delayed passage or an emergency authorization. So in the bills that the board was watching under chaptered legislation, AB 2113 did chapter, and this bill requires the board, any board within the Department of Consumer Affairs, to expedite and assist initial licensure applicants who supply satisfactory evidence to the board that they are a refugee or asylee or have a special immigrant visa. The bill authorizes the board to adopt regulations necessary to administer these provisions. Board staff has reviewed the bill and does not believe we need to pass any regulations for this bill, but we will be modifying the initial licensing applications as required, and they will be effective January 1, 2021. AB 2520, access to medical records, that bill the board supported. And current law requires a healthcare provider to provide a patient or the patient's representative with all or any part of the patient's medical record that the patient has a right to inspect, subject to the payment of clerical costs incurred in locating and making the records available, following a written request from the patient. Current law also requires a healthcare provider to provide one copy of the relevant portion of the patient record at no charge if the patient or a patient's representative presents proof to the provider that the records are needed to support an appeal regarding eligibility for a public benefit program. Now, prior to this bill, speech-language pathologists and audiologists were not included, along with physician assistants and nurse practitioners. Those professions are all now included in the bill or in that legislative or that statutory section. So now speech-language pathologists and audiologists have to provide a copy of the patient's medical record. The bill also has an additional provision that was added to require the provider to provide an employee of a nonprofit legal service entity that's representing the patient a copy of the medical record at no charge if that patient is seeking to appeal the eligibility for a public benefit program. SB 878 was on the Department of Consumer Affairs license application and processing timeframes. So this bill requires that beginning on July 1, 2021, that all boards within the department that issue licenses, which we all do, or most all do, that on at least a quarterly basis prominently display on our internet websites either the current average time frames for processing initial and renewal license applications or the combined current average time frame of processing both initial and renewal license applications. And the board has been posting application timeframes for speech language pathology and audiology for some time, but it's been on an intermittent basis. The board will begin posting these more regularly in compliance with the legislation, but also in line with that legislation, how it's broken down by license type and then initial versus renewal. So all of that information will be coming online next year. And then SB 1474, that's the Business and Professions bill, and we had a watch on this one. This is their big omnibus bill. This one, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, most of the boards that should have gotten or that would have started sunset review, the report writing this year, got pushed. So in order to do that, you, of course, have to extend the authorization or the sunset of a board. So our board, Speech and Hearing, we had our sunset extended from January 1, 2022 to January 1, 2023. So that way we can have the report writing where we answer all of the committee's questions next year, and then we'll go up for hearing in 2022, at the end of which the legislative session we hopefully will be authorized for another 4 years. The bill also had provisions that apply to speech and hearing licensees, and that it prohibits a contract for the provision of consumer services to include any limitation on the consumer to file a complaint with the board or to participate in the board's investigation into the licensee. Now, board staff wasn't aware that this is a significant problem in our professions, but we wanted to make sure all licensees knew and understood that they are now prohibited from having those clauses in their contracts. The rest of the legislation here all died, so these bills did not make it through the legislative process and are now officially dead because every new legislative session starts on an odd year. So the 21-22 session has to be all new bills. So the AB 613 we had a support position for, and that was on raising fees based on the consumer price index, potentially every 4 years. So that one is dead. A lot of these were watch bills, and I don't know if we want to go through them all the way we normally might in order for time since it's already 4:15. I'll go ahead and skip over to AB 2028. That was a bill about state agencies and meetings. The board took an opposed position. The board would have been required to provide the public with the meeting materials on the same day that it's provided to the board. And that presents problems just logistically wise due to the time it takes for us to get the meeting materials over to the Department of Consumer Affairs, who manages our websites and posts those items and has to remediate all materials for compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So logistically speaking, it could have presented problems where the board would not have been able to take up agenda items if they were not provided to the public in time. And so that bill has also died. It would have affected all state agencies. And the rest of these were all watch bills and will not be proceeding. So just again, as a highlight, the bills will start coming in January and February. The board staff will be reviewing all introduced legislation and, of course, bringing items that might be of interest or concern to the board at its next meeting, if there are any at that time. And we will continue to advocate for the board as the board approves. Does anyone have any questions?
This is Amnon. I have a question to Paul about one bill.
Mm-hmm.
The question is regarding AB 2113, and I would like to ask Paul, what what is in practicality means that the board will expedite and authorize to assist an initial licensure process. What does it mean in practicality the board should do, in his opinion?
Hi, Amnon. This is Paul. We have a provision law very similar to this that deals with military spouses of the military. So I think that what it means is we put this person at the front of the line to be processed. And Sharice, who oversees the board operations, could probably opine a little bit more on this as far as hands-on what it would mean. I think that's exactly what it would mean for us.
Okay. So my question is like this: I understand the military, for the sacrifice they're doing for the country, they should be ahead in line. But I don't understand why a refugee, which we welcome and give him everything, would be ahead of line in front of an American citizen.
I don't know that I could opine on the reasons for the legislature doing so, but I do know that operationally, as Paul said, that would place their application ahead of the other applications. We don't get very many military as well, so it's not that common that we get prioritized applications. As far as I know, the board staff help everyone with their applications, so I'm not sure how that would change it.
Yeah, I mean, that's my understanding, that the board give help to anybody, but I don't understand the reason to give or additional help and benefits to a non-citizen before a citizen. That's my question.
And I don't have the answer to that. I have to ask the author, look a little more into that.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Okay, do we have any more questions or discussion? Seeing none from the board, do we need to ask for a public comment on the legislative report?
Yes, Madam President, on each agenda item.
Okay.
All right, this is the moderator, and I have opened up the Q&A panel. If you would like to make a comment, please type, "I would like to make a comment," using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions. All right, this is the moderator. I see no requests for public comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's been closed.
Okay, moving along to item 15, legislative items for future meetings. The board may discuss other items of legislation to determine whether such items should be on future board meeting agenda, or whether to hold a special meeting of the board to discuss such items pursuant to Government Code Section 11125.4. So are there I'd like to call for any other suggestions for legislative items that we'd like to add to a future board meeting agenda. Hearing none from the board, shall we ask for public comment on this topic?
All right. I will open up, this is a moderator, and I have opened up the Q&A panel. We are displaying instructions for your reference.
Hi, this is Paul. I just want to add that if in any of these items, if you think of something after the meeting, of course, you could send that to Cherise or to me. Thank you.
All right, this is a moderator. I see no request for public comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's closed.
All right, we've already covered item number 16, so moving to 17, future agenda items and potential dates for board meetings and standalone committee meetings. I know of one topic that I'd like to add to a future meeting agenda, and that's the issue of cognitive screenings by audiologists and speech pathologists.
Marcia, this is Cherise. You said SLPs and AUs?
Yes. It's mostly about audiologists, but I think we need the information from the speech pathology community also. Can I just ask a procedural question, Cherise? If board members come up with items that they'd like to add to a future agenda, is it acceptable for them to just submit them to you by email prior to the next agenda being published? Is that acceptable?
Absolutely. And actually, it dovetails right into the second half of this agenda item that we'd like to move back to where the board meetings are on specific days next year, and that way we can build in more time to work on agendas and meeting materials so that because we kind of know the meetings are coming, and that'll take away some of the need to do all of the polls that you guys get from me. And so that way board members up to 3 weeks to a month before the board meeting can send in any agenda items they would like.
Okay.
This one's on the agenda as well for public comment so that they can ask for additional agenda items as well. So I know we'll want to go to public comment for that. I don't know if you want to do that first before potential meeting dates, or if everyone would like to hear sort of what Paul and I have strategized for next year.
I would like to hear that.
Go right into the calendar.
Okay. So we have pulled as much as we can everyone's future conferences, and looking also at times when the conferences would have happened this fall that presumably they might happen again next fall. So we've looked at HHP or hearing health professionals, healthcare providers, AAA, California Audiology Academy. I'm going to botch these names, I'm sorry. CASHA and ASHA. We've tried to look at a broad range of stakeholders and also the legislative calendar, knowing that we also are going to be up for sunset questions next year, and we're going to need to develop all of our questions and have a meeting in the fall. So what we've looked at is potentially having standalone board meetings in the first 2 weeks, either the 5th or 12th in February, another meeting in May on either the 7th or the 14th, a third meeting in August on either the 6th or the 13th. These are all Fridays because it seemed to work best. And then a fourth meeting on either October 8th or October 15th. And that would give us time for a potential conference call, if necessary, on November 5th, Friday, November 5th. In my prior experiences, once going through sunset, sometimes we get the sunset report prepared and to the board meeting in October, but find out we have a few more revisions to make and the board needs to approve the package as a whole. And so sometimes it requires an extra teleconference meeting in November, early in November, because we need to get it all prepped and over to publications and then to the sunset committees by December 1. So in light of kind of next year's sunset and trying to be a little more prepared on these meetings and with the agendas, that's what we're hoping to do. I know that's kind of difficult because everyone's calendars are up in the air and nobody knows quite what next year is going to look like. But if it's okay to move forward with that, I would love to suggest that we talk about meeting on the 5th or 12th of February, on the 7th or 14th of May, the 6th or 13th of August, the 8th or 15th of October, and then reserving a potential teleconference for sunset on November 5th. Does that sound okay to everyone, or I don't know if everyone's opening their calendars?
I'm kind of looking at my calendar, but I guess I lean toward the earlier date of those two choices for each month. But I don't have a good explanation other than school starts and it gets harder for me the later in the month it goes in August.
Holly, we see your hand up.
I'm completely flexible right now. Anything's fine.
Todd?
The only thing I'm looking at is in May. I would probably prefer the latter part of the month, in the middle as opposed to the beginning, because I may be out of town that first week of May.
Okay. So the 14th looks a little better than the 7th?
Yes, please, if that's agreeable to everyone.
That's fine with me.
Okay. Well, why don't I go ahead and plan to do the earlier days in February, so February 5th, May 14th, August 6th, October 8th, and Friday, November 5th. And then, of course, the new board chair can work on committee assignments, and then we can look at having standalone committee meetings in between those board meetings so that everything can be spread out enough to not be overly problematic to any of the committee members, but also get the work of the board done next year.
Sorry, could you just repeat those dates one more time?
Absolutely. And we'll put them on the website as well. February 5th, so Friday, February 5th. Friday, May 14th. Friday, August 6th. Friday, October 8th. And Friday, November 5th. And that last one would be most likely only about sunset, if needed.
Great, thank you.
Dr. Raggio, before we adjourn, if we're done with this agenda item, are we done with this agenda item, or do we still have to go to public comment?
I believe public comment.
Okay.
All right, this is the moderator. I'll open up public comment. Anyone would like to make? Go ahead. Okay, this is the moderator. I see no request for public comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Thanks, please.
Okay, it's been closed.
Dr. Raggio, I have additional comments before we adjourn.
Okay, me too. So go ahead. Let's see if they're the same.
I'm going to guess that they probably are. Just today is the last board meeting date for a couple of our board members. We're sad to see them go because they've both been, to me, a great help. First off, I just want to acknowledge Amnon Shalev, Amnon has been with the board since 2012. There has never been a time where I call Amnon on his cell phone that he doesn't pick up, that he doesn't answer my call, and that he doesn't try to be as helpful as he can be. I've enjoyed working with Amnon. I've gotten to know him a little bit, and I just want to say that we're going to sorely miss him. The other board member is Dr. Rod Diaz. Dr. Rod Diaz has been with the board, I believe, since 2010, where he served a partial term and then 2 full terms. Dr. Diaz has always been a voice of reason for the board, also willing to help out. It's been convenient to have him in Sacramento because oftentimes we've worked at the Capitol together. But I just want to express my appreciation for both of these gentlemen, both of these professionals. It's going to be hard to see both of you go, and I want to wish you both well, and I hope that you stay in touch with us and visit our meetings once in a while. If we weren't going through the pandemic, I imagine we'd all want to go have dinner or a drink. So I just want to bid you farewell and thank you for all you've done for the board.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. This is Amnon. And it was a pleasure for me to serve with you and with all the other board members. And just to tell you a little story, I was requested a month ago by the appointment secretary of the governor to continue another term of 4 years. And I said, fine, but they said you need to fill up a great application like we never knew before. Go to the FBI, go to the whole enchilada, and I said, this is ridiculous, and I pass on it, just to let you know.
Yeah, I had something similar. The governor's office asked me to, if I wanted to serve over again, and I said, well, actually, just told me that I couldn't. So I think they forgot that I'd served 2.5 terms. But it's been a great pleasure serving with all of you, and I thank you very much for the experience.
Well, this is Marcia. I wanted to echo what Paul said, that really enjoyed working with both of you, and especially arguing politics with Amnon. And when I first met Rod, I just loved him right away because he kept handing M&Ms under the table to each of us, which was really appreciated in the middle of some of these dry meetings. So I'll miss you both and wish you both well. And thank you for all you've done for the board over these many years.
Thank you, Marcia. Just imagine what politics we would have without the pandemic this year.
Absolutely, I can imagine. So I'll miss that.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Same to you both.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, one other comment I did want to make. It's a little disjointed here, but I was concerned that one of our public members expressed concern that the CEU hours that are going to be offered at the upcoming virtual CASHA meeting might not be counted. Maybe I misunderstood her. Perhaps Holly caught that. And I want to make sure that this individual knows that those hours will count. So is Ms. Linares still in?
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Holly.
I was going to say that what she would be referring to is that is the limit of the hours, not that they're not counted at all, but that since all the hours are virtual, typically our members will have the opportunity to complete all of their 24 hours by attending the conference when it was in person. And we want to be able to give that, the CASHA wants to be able to offer that same opportunity that you can do all of your hours if you need to through that convention. The way the law is written right now, that's impossible because of the limit. It would be very hard to do it all live virtually, because most people, when you do virtual, you don't sit in front of a computer all day for 8 hours or 10 hours. You're going to take some courses, pick out some other ones that are recorded and take those later.
Oh, I see.
See what I'm saying?
California Academy of Audiology did theirs entirely virtually, so we didn't have any self-study of that sort in ours. But yes, that would be the case with them. With Capture.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay.
So the courses will all be recorded for the ones that, so every course could be taken live where you could interact. But again, one of the advantages of the fact that it's all virtual is that people don't have to make those choices where there's 3 courses at 10 a.m. and I only get to take one. It's actually such a wonderful advantage that now they'll have access to all of them. It just, they would take them later, and hopefully our waiver passes and they'll be able to count everything.
Yes.
Dr.
Okay.
Weiss, I have a comment.
Sorry, Paul.
No, I just wanted to add to that, that even though we all understand that, and maybe the person commenting did clearly understand that, if the nice folks at Casher could help us just get that word out so that it's very clear that attending a virtual conference where there's interaction and it's live does count towards CE, and there is no restriction on that. It's a recorded self-study that has a restriction. Thank you.
Okay, I believe at this juncture we're going to go into closed session. There are a number of items that will be covered during that time, but we will be adjourning the meeting after the closed session. So we won't be coming back into open session. So I'd like to thank all public members who came to the meeting, but we will be closing now. And I'm going to kind of turn it a little bit over to Charisse and to Mr. Chin.
And this is the moderator. I'm going to go ahead and dismiss members of the public. And
can I just say goodbye to everyone? Have a happy Thanksgiving. I am now signing off.
Same to you, Paul. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye, Paul.
Happy
Thanksgiving.